everyone, welcome. Happy Thursday. This is our last Zoom side chat for 2020, so I'm really excited that we got to have these opportunities throughout the spring and the summer and the fall. And I think we're going to go out on a really big bang by having Edie and John with us. So for those that don't know, Edie and John, they both work with ESRI. Edie works out of California, and John, if I remember right, works out of Michigan.
Yes, thank you for not saying Wisconsin. I feel like everybody hears Michigan and they immediately say just Wisconsin. It's always Wisconsin.
Is there a difference?
Oh my goodness. We'll have words later.
And Edie and John have put together this fantastic cartography MOOC course that many of us have taken and really enjoyed. And they've got great presence online. If you're interested in anything cartography, GIS related, I'll put their Twitter and Instagram handles up and everything. And basically, what I wanted to invite them in was, one, to talk about the normal things we've been talking about, sort of the career path and the being a professional geographer. But then also, because of their unique expertise in data visualization and communicating with maps, I think we're living in an era now where, because of COVID and all the dashboards and all the maps that we're seeing, that GIS is kind of having a moment. And I kind of want their feedback on, as we teach young geographers how to use these tools, what are our obligations? How do we do this in a way where we make sure that the visualizations they're making, the way our students are communicating, is effective, as the least biased it can be, and that sort of thing. So John, Edie, it's wonderful to have y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks everybody
nice
for
to
being
be here. Yeah. So John, you've got like a TikTok planned or something for this, right?
I'm too old for TikTok. They won't even let me have an account.
I saw that Planet Money even has a TikTok, and I thought, wow, if economists can have a TikTok, they'll just let anybody do it.
No kidding.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't know. Where do you want us to jump in?
Let's start here. So Edie, we joked earlier about your job at ESRI is really to keep Ken from doing something embarrassing, but I know that's not really it. So
that's not really it. No.
High level, what is it you do all day?
Oh yeah, well, I guess officially my title is product engineering lead for cartography. So I've been at ESRI for 24 years, and more than half of that, the last 16 or so, have been in our software development group. So I've been working on all of our desktop software. So that started with ArcMap, and now ArcGIS Pro for sure is primarily what I work on. And really, we have developers and we have product engineers, and developers are the ones who typically went to school for computer science or whatever. They're in there writing source code, and the product engineers are the ones who do everything else. And one of the key things of everything else is always going back to our role is to advocate for the user. So really, yes, I have a boss, but really my boss is the people who are using ArcGIS Pro every day to help with floods and fire and planning and logistics and all the myriad of ways that Pro gets used. So I kind of I think of myself as wearing sort of three hats. I am a product engineer where I advocate for the user. So that means what should the software do? How should it do it? How should it look? How should it work? What's a sensible way for it to work? We call that the user experience. How it looks is the user interface. I'm a technical writer. I'm the lead writer for mapping. So a big part of what I do is communicate back and forth. So I understand how it is that people use our software, and I communicate that to our developers. And then I communicate what it is that we've built back to our users, or back to people who are marketing our software or selling our software, or the people who are teaching our software. So our education team, or professors out in the world. So the core part of my job is communication. And then we joked about, keeping Ken in line and things like that. Ken is a brilliant cartographer and he does not need me to keep him in line at all. But I do consider myself an advocate for cartography at ESRI as well. So making sure, and there's a few of us that do this, John and Ken and a number of others, making sure that the cartographic messages coming out of ESRI are sensible, making sure that what we're building works for cartographers, making sure that maps are being used responsibly. And we can get into that a little bit more when we talk about, like you said, dashboards and visualizations. But there's, it's not rocket science, but there are a few basic things that can make that a lot better.
Thanks, Edie.
Yeah.
Well, it's been really nice to
I was going to say, Edie's the reason why if I can't find something in Pro or if I don't know how to do something, I absolutely know I can Google it and find out really fast.
I'm worried that my students are going to find out that really the only thing I'm good at is knowing the right thing to Google to find the answer because I don't actually know anything.
It's the new best skill.
I think that's
short of
true
actually
for all
knowing
of us.
Edie.
So, John, if we were to look at your Twitter profile and that sort of thing, or your YouTube channel, I would think that you hang out in the garden and you're like, look at this cool tree, look at the bark pattern. Wouldn't this make an awesome style in ArcGIS Pro? And then you figure out how to bring that bark pattern in. So how does that, what do you actually do? Because I'm sure that's not it.
I have never, ever made a bark pattern in ArcGIS Pro yet, but that's a really good idea.
Just wait about 3 hours and there will be one uploaded.
I know what I'm doing tomorrow. You know what? I retract my statement. I go directly to Edie, and if she's not available, then I Google it, which is one of the perks of ESRI. Actually, one of the cool things about working at ESRI is you can just ask somebody who worked on a thing if you're confused about something or if it doesn't seem to be working right or you don't know if it does something, and they'll tell you, oh, that's so-and-so who worked. You can talk to them, which is great. Anyways, you all can talk to them too. You just have a harder time figuring out who they are. I work for the content team. So data, things that ESRI makes and tries to make available, things that you make and share via Living Atlas. So Living Atlas is almost like this Wikipedia-like thing where you can find and totally use data that's out there that ESRI is providing or content that customers and students and teaching folks upload to Living Atlas to help disseminate their data and their maps and stuff like that. So it's this really cool resource. I use it not exclusively, but a lot, and it's cool. And part of what I'm supposed to be doing is I do a lot of user experience design. So while my educational background is in geography and GIS and cartography and stuff like that, my practical work experience is almost totally user experience design. I was a user experience designer and did a lot of graphic design and information architecture for a company before ESRI. And then I came to ESRI about 5 years ago, and I do a mix of user experience design and goofing around with maps. So the goofing around bit is the stuff that you're probably more aware of because I can't shut up about it, and I'll tweet about it or write a blog how I did something. I'll tell you, it's fun I've found it's a lot of fun to make maps and make visualizations and figure out ways to present data, but it's a lot more fun to talk about how I did it and advocate for that and say, hey, if you want to try it out, here's how I did it and here's how you can do it too. I found that that's a lot more rewarding. Even though making maps is super rewarding, sharing the process is even more rewarding, I think.
When you all put the blog posts together and the tutorials and the YouTube videos, those are so useful because, as someone who's an instructor here and, my other job duties, sometimes it's actually hard to do GIS during my normal day. And like when I see something that you all have done, I'm like, oh, that's really inspiring. Let me see if I can follow along and recreate that process and learn along the way. So when you all do that, those things I find super, super valuable.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I can tell you, like anecdotally, when I was doing user experience, It was 10 years of following requirements documents and making something. And while that's a creative endeavor, it wasn't stuff that, they weren't my ideas and they weren't my hunches and they weren't my follow-ups and it wasn't my design necessarily. I was working for somebody else. But I think anybody who's in a GIS department tends to be a maker, a creative person, like somebody who's got to make. And if you're a maker, it's inside you and you're going to have to get it out somehow. So that's actually what caused the whole shift over back to mapping, because I realized I hadn't made anything in so many years. And I just started making maps again and sharing them on Twitter, and which actually led to me being able to work at ESRI, because if I hadn't done those things, a lot of the work that we do is kind of in secret. You build it for a customer and nobody ever sees it except for that customer, and nobody knows that you had worked on it. But if you're in GIS, I'm pretty sure that all of us here are creative folks who have making in us, and it's going to spill out one way or the other. So that's all I have to say about that.
One of your old blog, the UX blog, I think that you used to run, John.
Yeah. Wow, digging deep. I love it.
You've got a poster on there. We do a lab inspired by the data classification poster that you've got, where
cool.
we put the different maps up and then we add the different histograms and things for it to explain how you can either unintentionally or intentionally manipulate people's understanding of the data very, very easily.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Yeah, those are great, and I feel like from an introductory standpoint, they're the sort of things that is really useful for the students to understand and really kind of appreciate that kind of nuance. So let me just pause. For those of you all that are joining us, do you all have any questions so far, otherwise related to things that Edie and John do there at ESRI?
I have a question for John, just with the user experience stuff. Have you done anything with like virtual reality or the Unreal Engine or any of that cool stuff?
No, that's too cool for me. Mainly what I do is mock-ups for applications, web-based apps, and kind of wireframes and workflows, and I'll work with a developer. We used to whiteboard. Now we don't whiteboard anymore. Now we go like this and share images with each other and talk a lot. But no, I haven't done those things. And I have to say, I'm not a developer and I can't code. And so there is a limit to what I can do. But I think that's one of the benefits of a specialized economy. You've got people who are really good and efficient at coding, and people who are really good and efficient at, maybe information architecture. And when you put those teams together, really cool stuff happens. That's how I rationalize my gaps.
I'm just lucky to have Dr. Wu that can help me with all my programming problems.
Yes. A round of applause for Dr. Wu.
Yes. Yeah. You can find him on Twitter. He's always doing stuff with Google Earth Engine, I think is one of his big things.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, Edie, can we talk for just a minute about, you said you've worked at ESRI for a number of years and you've got this background in cartography. Was ESRI the goal all along? And how did you get from whenever you found out you wanted to work in geography to where you are? And we don't have to obviously like do the deep dive, but just at a high level. Also, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, I fell off for a moment because my whole internet crashed, but I'm back and hopefully I'm back for a bit. This is the problem with having spouse and children also online in the middle of the day. So yeah, we're gonna go deep dive. I'm gonna start with the day I was born. ESRI was really not the goal. Honestly, it's a little bit bewildering that I've spent nearly half my life working for ESRI because that was not the goal. I went to school, I was born and raised and grew up in Canada, and that's where I went to school. And there's a very long history of geography, geomatics, GIS in Canada. The US was not on my radar ESRI was not on my radar. Certainly software development was not on my radar. I never considered myself a computer person. I did my geography studies with an emphasis on Indigenous Canadians, and was studying a lot about Native mapping and Native understanding of the land. I went, after I finished my geography degree, Canada was in a recession. So I went to a very hands-on technical college and learned cartography there. And this was kind of pre-computer days. So it was a lot of darkroom and scribe code and, you know, actual get your elbows in deep kind of cartography. And honestly, I envisioned myself working on native land claims, working, you know, in some sort of environmental management, maybe for the federal government. And really, reality kind of set in the form of a pretty major recession in the early 90s in Canada. And ESRI came recruiting and offered me a full-time job with benefits. And honestly, we all need to eat.
You get benefits?
I do, yeah.
I've got to talk to some people.
He gets paid too, John.
Not fair.
Now, I know that makes it sound like, oh, I'm kind of sad and I sold out. But what happened when I got here was sort of a new perspective, and really realized how many people we actually touch with software like this, and all the different ways we can impact the world. And that's kind of neat. And it's actually been a really great company to work for. I tell people all the time, you know, 24 years in, it's never 2 days in a row that are the same. It continues to be challenging and inspiring, and I work with great, smart people, and I don't remember a single work day in 24 years where I've said, I'm bored, I don't have enough to do, I don't know why I'm doing this, you know. So let's be honest, I mean, that's what you want. You want a stable job, and you want to feel like what you're doing has some purpose, and I've always felt that way, and that's why I stayed. So yeah, was not the goal, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out.
And, you know, I really think when I talk to my undergrads in particular, I think that there's something about geographers where we all feel like, in particular, we want to do something meaningful, and we want to use the skills and the knowledge we have to make a difference. And every time I talk to students, I get that impression from folks. So I don't know if that's universal with young people. Maybe we're lucky and it's just a universal thing, but it at least seems to be universal with geographers.
Well, I had a moment kind of early on in my career, because I spent the first 5 years at ESRI working for our professional services division. And at the time, that meant building products primarily for military mapping. And as a Canadian coming in, you know, kind of a diehard pacifist, that took a little bit of a choke on me, you know. I was like, wait, what happened? What, I'm building maps for the military industrial complex, you know? And even that, it took a bit of rethinking, and somebody who was a mentor to me at the time sat me down and said, you know, the more accurate these maps are, the more easy, like the more easily we can protect civilian populations or environmentally crucial areas, or, you know, there's always another way to think about it. And, you know, maybe I was just making excuses, but that conversation is more than 20 years into my past, and I still remember it. And I think about that kind of thing. Like, there's always another side to what you're doing. And I think it's easy when we're in our undergrad program to feel like, you know, I want to go save the world or something. And I think there's a lot of different ways that we can be, you know, saving the world. And it's not as black and white as you know, I'm working for a nonprofit versus selling out to the corporate man. You know, there's a lot of gray area in there.
Yeah, but for every one of us, every time we do a project well, I mean, to me, that means we're supporting someone, we're helping someone make better decisions, you know, data-driven decisions. So I would think all of those things would be a win.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, John, you said that formerly user experience, but you were actually classically trained geography and cartography. So how did you get from geography and cartography to sort of user interface?
Dumb luck. Well, I graduated with a degree in geography, with, you know, specializing in GIS and stuff. Back then we called it the techniques, and it was really touted as being this amazing market, you know, high in demand and stuff. And I was unemployed for a few months after you know, leading up to graduation. People are getting jobs and I'm getting nothing. You know, I sent my resume out to just hundreds and hundreds of places. I never heard back from any of them. And I was married, had a baby on the way, and I was unemployed. And then I was living in my in-laws' basement, sending out emails on their little machine, you know, feeling not like, you know, an entire whole person, you know, not feeling very responsible. And that was dark. But things work out, you know. Stuff like that doesn't last forever. And it's I remember emailing a professor who I had that I really admire and I still talk to. And I kind of told him my situation. He's like, well, you know, it seems dark now, but it'll work out. It'll be okay. And I was like, yeah, easy for you to say. You've got a job. And, but it did, you know, eventually, you know, something worked out and you chip away and you forget exactly like how hard it was for a while. So I don't know. The reason I'm saying that, I guess, is you've got some students here who are either, you know, close to the end of their degree program or maybe at the end of their degree program. I don't know if you're looking for a job still or if you've got anything secured, but if you've got a job secured before you graduate, oh man, I'm jealous and I'm gonna fight with you because that blew my mind when I was a student because I wasn't anywhere close. Turns out I had been spelling attachment wrong in all of my cover letters and emails that I'd sent to somebody. So I think that was a pretty easy first pass where they could just kind of throw that one out. Oh, I got 300 emails from people who want this entry-level job. This kid doesn't know how to spell attach right. Anyways, it'll be fine. It'll work out. I eventually got an interesting job out in Massachusetts for a Native American tribe on a little island, the Wampanoag tribe, as their GIS and water quality technician. I didn't know anything about water quality, but I guess the GIS part was enough to seal the deal. So I worked out there for a year and then went back to school and then was unemployed again for a second time. That was really rough. So, man, I've been unemployed. And it can be stressful, but it doesn't last forever, so that's good. And it really is nice these days. Before this, Michael, Edie, and I were talking about how we're fortunate to have jobs that we can do remotely, which is something I'm especially grateful now. I work remotely in Michigan, and I always have, you know, with ESRI. I was hired remotely, but in this whole lockdown situation where everybody has to go home, well, I was really blessed and fortunate to have a job where I could just, you know, as long as I've got an internet connection, I can do my work and get paid. And it's such a relief and a blessing. And so many people can't, which is rough. So
yeah,
you won't hear me complain.
Well, and you know, we both have kids at home, and being able to get paid while they're in the next room doing school during this time is also pretty lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love the fact that we get to have a conversation among professionals where we can be honest about like the struggles with employment, especially coming out of school can be really challenging. You know, when I came out of my program, it was the first big recession that we had in 2008 for me. And, you know, now I'm looking over and trying to help students and I feel like it's like deja vu and I'm trying to like teach them the strategies I used to make it out okay. But I was in the same boat. When I finished my GIS certificate, the best work I could find was volunteer work for the Red Cross, doing mapping work for them because no one was hiring. But that ended up being one of the things when I applied to grad school that they really liked, was that I had practical experience and I was doing work for nonprofits. So I had no idea at the time that it was going to be useful and it was going to benefit me, but it did.
That's a good point. So one bit of advice that I give to students all the time is to make something demonstrable that you can show somebody in an interview that you did on your own for fun, that was intrinsically motivated.
Totally.
I mean, so many interviews, like, here's an assignment I did with my class, and here's another assignment I did with my class. And people who are interviewing you, really their brains going, how much of this did they actually work on? So they start asking questions about what your role was in it. And if you roll into an interview and you show this portfolio of things and say, I did this for fun, and then I saw this, it led to this piece of data and I was curious about it, and then I heard about this visualization technique, so I tried it out here. I mean, holy smokes, you're going to blow the doors off that interview. They're going to love that.
So, Michael, I do a lot of hiring and assessing candidates, either for roles on my team or for other managers I work with, and then a lot of onboarding of new staff. And I can totally back up what John just said. Honestly, our eyes kind of glaze over when people tell us about an assignment, because all those assignments tell me about is about your professor. Is this a cool assignment? Okay, you had a pretty cool professor who knew what they were on about. I think, having done job hunting during a pretty formidable recession and also being unemployed for a while, and it is pretty dark, and knowing what I know now about being on the other side of the desk when you're interviewing somebody or assessing somebody for a job, honestly, I don't really care how many ArcGIS commands you know. I don't really care that much about, like I said, what assignments you did or what grade you got in it. It's what I look for is something that is really important in our entry-level jobs, and I would assume in many entry-level jobs, is you make that shift from school to working, and suddenly it's not assignment-based anymore. I mean, I'm sure there's some jobs, but the good jobs are not your boss telling you every day or every Monday morning what to do. And that's certainly not how we roll at ESRI. I have a lot of new staff, and I, as a general rule, do not micromanage them, and I don't tell them exactly what they need to be doing unless they really need that helping hand, and I'll do it for a little while until they can go off and be on their own. But there's this big shift, and some people catch it faster than others, and you're a step ahead if you can even catch it before you get the job. This idea of find the thing out there that is not being done, that interests you, of course. You have to have some passion under there, but find the thing that's not being done but would be useful to somebody. What is that thing? And then go figure out how to do it. And figuring out how to do it might not be enough. You might need to advocate for it. You might need to request permissions. You might need to request resources. You might you might need to sell the idea to somebody, but that's okay. That advocating part, I mean, I started this whole conversation off with how I advocate for the user and I advocate for cartography. Learning how to advocate for something is not something we do very well in teaching undergrads, I don't think, but it's a huge part of that shift into the working world. So find an idea that's important, that will help somebody, figure out how to advocate for it. And then conversely, the other side of that is be open-minded, be okay with the idea that maybe you were wrong. Maybe it's not a good idea, or maybe it's a good idea, but honestly it needs 5 more years, or maybe it's a good idea, but it's too expensive, or something like that. So get passionate about that, go after it, advocate for it, figure out what it is, and then try to do the steps to make it happen, but don't get so attached to it that you're not hearing the feedback. You know, be okay with being wrong, be okay with being patient and having to put it on the back burner. And those are the people that are successful in getting the jobs and successful in their first year on the job of, certainly as a product engineer on my team, you know, find the thing that I haven't even thought of that ArcGIS Pro should be doing, and come to me, prove to me why we should do it, why I should put resources on that. And sometimes it's a great idea, and I say it's a great idea, but honestly, it's going to be minimum 2 years until we can even think about it, you know, and be okay with that too. And sometimes it's just a crappy idea, you know, like, that's okay. That's the total learning process, you know. So that flip side of being okay with either being wrong or needing to be patient. And those are the things that are hard to teach. You sort of have that intrinsically or you don't. I really don't care how many geoprocessing tools you know how to use. Like that kind of stuff, I can teach you on the job like that. I can find somebody else to teach you on the job. But if you have that sense of, I know how to advocate for something and I know how to be a normal, mature adult when it doesn't go my way, then you're golden.
Oh, crap.
Sounds like you have some really interesting stories from an HR standpoint, but we probably don't have time for those. So,
you know, I was actually going to jump on something Edie said. So Edie's right. Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm listening to it and thinking, man, it might be kind of intimidating hearing find something nobody's done but would be helpful. Like, oh, great.
Well, okay, maybe
But a
not
practical,
nobody's done.
no. But I mean, a practical example of this might be whatever your minor is. So if you've got a minor, chances are they're not doing a whole lot of GIS work in that minor. You could easily apply what you know in GIS and that you've learned in your geography courses to your minor, and then show it to some of the professors, like, hey, professor, you're talking about, you know, this or that, and I actually found some data related to this and put it on a map. And I almost guarantee you it'll be the first time that that non-map person has seen a map of the phenomenon that they're super into.
Yeah.
And it'll blow their minds. So many people have never seen a map of the thing they love and that they study. And if you do that, then they're going to be so engrossed. They might give you feedback. They'll ask if they can use it in presentations. You know, you'll be talking to the dean of that department pretty soon. You know, you'll get a job with that department making maps for them because they're like, maps are amazing all of a sudden. So like, think of it that way. Or if you've got like a hobby or a passion that you're really into, you know, say it's mountain biking or something, you know, you can make a map of all the trails for mountain bikes, all the, you know, the locations where there's people meeting for mountain, the city addresses of all the mountain biking enthusiast members of Tennessee and Kentucky. You know,
Yeah.
there's always something you can do, and it doesn't have to be like this earth-shattering thing.
I totally agree with that. Like, and some of those ideas, you know, even on the job are small things like, hey, you know, if we add this checkbox here that lets the user to decide, you know, X versus Y, wouldn't that be cool? You know, boom, whoa, yeah, that I had never thought of that. You know, so it can be something small, but I think to riff on what John's saying is, you know, find those connections that other people aren't making. And John is really good about this. And I think it was before the recording started, you know, kind of teasing him about finding, you know, a tree in his garden and making a style out of it. But it's true. Like, what is cartography? Cartography is just a specialized form of graphic communication. How can you be inspired? Like, what are you inspired by? Did you go to an art museum and see a beautiful painting and get inspired by why those colors work? Or, you know, what is it that inspires you? Yeah, like, is it mountain biking? Is it, you know, who knows what? But find the connections throughout your life and sort of connect the dots there. And that opens a world of just innovation, I think, when you connect the dots with the things that inspire you.
So just for reference, there's a link to a podcast. I know I start every conversation was I was listening to a podcast, but a friend of mine, Kurt Menke, who lives in Albuquerque where I used to live, he's big in the open source community, and he was doing this interview. And one of the things he talked about was having not just the geospatial skills, but then there aren't really just like GIS jobs anymore. It's more like I have a passion for forestry, but I'm going to use GIS to solve problems. Or I have a passion for human migration, I'm going to use it. And he talks a little bit about that in that podcast. It's worth a listen to. And he also talks about like the value, how he built his network kind of organically and that sort of thing. But anyway, good guy to listen to.
I would totally agree with that. I mean, I think of GIS as sort of a tool, I don't think there are GIS jobs either. And it's a bag of tools, bag of skills, and what's more important is understanding what's behind it. So, I see a lot of people who come at me with really beautiful maps in their portfolio, and they're these one-offs, and they're gorgeous, and they could win awards at whatever mapping competition. But, hey, talk to me about what kind of map a city planner is making, or a geologist, or somebody who works for an oil and gas company, and that if you don't know those kinds of things, or at least one of those areas, then you're still not getting the whole picture. Like there's more to it than just the one-off, sort of beautiful art piece. If you're looking for a job in this arena, of course.
Well, let me just pause for a minute then. We've kind of been all over the place because one of my follow-up questions was, thinking about for students, if they're interested in going with ESRI for a career, and you've hit a lot on the things that you all would be interested in, just so that the participants on the call know. So one of our recent graduates, Brennan, is working with ESRI remotely, but based out of the Charlotte office. Another one of our recent graduates, Nick Carrick, is working with ESRI. He actually works a lot with Sonny Fleming out of Nashville. And then one of our former graduate students, Ian Feathers, had previously worked at ESRI for a number of years. So it's not like this is something impossible. And, there are a lot of folks from East Tennessee that this is part of their career path. And just so you all know, if you take a look at the ESRI website, they have I'll put it here in the chat. They're recruiting right now for next year's summer interns. So if this is something you're thinking about, you should look into it and and John and Edie, you can tell me if I'm totally wrong about this, but one of the things that's nice about the summer internship program is that that's kind of like a vetting process, and it's not unheard of for someone to be hired full-time at the end of the summer internship program.
Not at all. I've had a number of summer interns. I just said goodbye to a really awesome one about 3 weeks ago because she had to go back to school for her final year. But yeah, it ends up being really a kind of a 12-week job interview on both sides. It gives you kind of a chance to sort of try ESRI on for size and see if you like it, if that's the kind of work you want to do as well. And it was a little bit different this year. It was a virtual internship, which, I think was kind of a bummer because there's a lot to be said for bringing all those interns together in the summer normally and doing a lot of like just fun get-togethers and trips. But from what I can tell, there was still a lot of integration even via Zoom for the interns, and so many opportunities and resources and talks like this from senior staff, and it's great. And we're fortunate enough to be a pretty solid company. We are still hiring despite the fact that we're in a weird time.
Yeah, that's cool.
we're still running an internship program. It's a paid internship, you know, so yeah, you're totally on track with that, Michael.
And there are lots of, I mean, not just ESRI, everybody's looking for somebody who can help them understand their data, even map data. So the cool thing about mapping and geography, and specifically GIS, is that, I mean, we just got done saying that, well, there aren't that many GIS jobs, but there are actually a lot of GIS jobs, because every level of government, from the most local government, you know, a township, a county, and then different state departments, they all have mapping needs. And they may or may not have a GIS person on staff. They might have somebody who, you know, they all use, who's like in a basement piled up with stuff and requests, and they're just like getting swarmed by requests, and they're the lone GIS ninja. But they all have mapping needs. So look around at your local government, you know, email the head of the township, or, you know, the recycling center, and ask them if there's any kind of mapping needs that they have, and suggest things like, if you show me your daily routes of your recycling routes, you know, maybe I can look at it and maybe come up with a more cost-effective route for you that's more efficient with time and fuel, something like that. I mean, there's so many opportunities to get experience, and you might not necessarily get paid. You might end up getting paid, but I mean, you know, the not paid stuff that you really chisel away at and get good experience and show tenacity, that pays dividends later on, and that you've got cool experience. You've got a resource who, when you interview for your next full-time job, they'll call that person. That person's going to say, they came out of nowhere and started making all kinds of maps for me, and they're amazing. You got to hire this person. So there's a lot of opportunities. You just kind of need to make them.
Yeah, totally. That was my first job. Was I actually worked for free for a graphic designer for almost a year, and in exchange, like, I worked in his office, and I got to use his software at the time, because computers and software were unobtainable back then. I mean, prices were through the roof. So I taught myself Illustrator and freehand and a lot of these other graphics packages on a black and white monitor, by the way, because that was a thing back then. Color monitors were expensive. And in exchange, I kind of worked as his receptionist, you know. And by the time I decided to go back to school a year later, I was being paid full-time, and he replaced me with a full-time worker. And yeah, I mean, I know there was a little bit of privilege that I did have enough of a support system where I could go and work for free for a few months. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of ramen noodles involved, but I know that's not everybody's case, but it was amazing how quickly that, you know, free thing turned into paid work, because, you know, a few weeks in, it was like, oh, I really need help with this. I'll pay you for a couple hours if you can type this up for me. Oh yeah, sure. Okay, I can do that. And oh, can you handle this? I'll pay you for a couple hours. Oh yeah, I can do that. And you know, you got to just think outside the box sometimes. And I think in a lot of ways now it's easier. We've got social media, and social media can be kind of gross sometimes, but if you use it properly, it can be fantastic. And you know, you can put your crazy project out there in the world, and there are people on the other side of the planet who are going to see it and be like, that's cool. And they might remember that, you know, and that certainly was not a thing a generation ago. It was a whole lot harder to build a portfolio, a physical portfolio, and, you know, drag it around town in a snowstorm from job to job. So use those tools too. And even if it's not like job related, you know, some of these crazy pet projects that we all talk about, you know, it's amazing the connections you make when you just sort of start sharing some of your hobbies or whatever.
I want to be really respectful of your time, because I asked for 45 minutes and we've been here for a few minutes longer than that. do you all have time to stick around for a round of questions, or do you need to go right away?
I've got time. I don't have anywhere to be.
I've got time. We negotiated a pretty good overtime package.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
check's in the
happy
mail.
to go as long as you want.
Let
You
me
got the meter running, eh?
let me open it up then. There's so many follow-up conversations I'd love to have about building your digital brand and marketing yourself. Just anyway, there's so many fun topics I'd love to follow up with you all on, but I need to shut up and let everybody else ask questions.
This is Kurt. I just want to say, somebody said, put something in your portfolio that has intrinsic value, not an assignment, but that something you did for fun or passion. Thank you so much. I wrote that down, and I'm going to open my next $4.99 capstone class with that quote, because I think that's amazing information. Thank you.
Yeah,
And there's
definitely.
a hack to that too. So, I mean, you can feel totally out of time because you've got classes and maybe a job or something. If you've got an assignment where you create a map as a result of an assignment, just apply that same process to different data, and then it's totally yours. And you can say, now we had an assignment where I did something, but I was curious about this data, and so I did this on my own. And you get the same benefit. You didn't really have to come up with the entire GIS workflow. So you can totally piggyback / steal all of Michael's efforts for teaching and claim it as your own.
Totally agree with that.
What is plagiarism? You know, it's fun.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say to John, I definitely use the Living Atlas in my urban model, and thank you for, you know, if you've worked any with that, thanks for hooking that up. And Edie, you know, what you were saying about, like, you know, trying to find something new and drive buy-in and get data and stuff like that. I was at the Geodesign Summit in February, and I came back and started working in urban. And so I almost felt like you were speaking directly to me, because
Oh,
I've
good.
got data, but I've also had to learn to hear no and things like that. So thank you both.
Yeah. Cool.
I'd just like to quickly add gratitude for what each of you shared. I am definitely a newbie to the GIS world, as Michael would know. I've been itching to get in his intro level course, but sticking with the point about passion projects, this is something on the other side of my dissertation that I'd like to return to, particularly because I'm a pastor and I'm interested in merging GIS with sermons and church in sort of a way to do some critical analysis around some things that I can't quite fully devote the time at the present moment, but that's why I wanted to log on, just to get more references and tools for down the line, because I got a whole slew of things I want to unpack, and I know GIS would be remarkable for the communities I care the most about. So thanks for sharing.
That's so awesome to hear. Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably like a whole wealth of things that someone like yourself is thinking about, you know, and then that's what I mean. Like, what are the different parts of your life? How can you connect them? Where is geography important? Where does it come into play? And how can you bring all that together and then unravel it and communicate it well back out? And that's really what GIS is all about. So.
And
That's so cool.
It can put your thinking and the stuff that you're reading into context. So I heard one time somebody describe, you know, when Jesus said, you have faith the size of a mustard seed, it can move a mountain, right? And we know where he said that, and we also know what's right next door to that. It was right next door to a mountain whose top had been removed by Herod for material in a building project. So Herod had moved a mountain, right? And so in that context, he was, you know, probably pointing to the mountain right then. And that just gives context, and context adds meaning.
Yeah.
So location matters.
You guys got me thinking. I might have to tell my committee I'm adding another chapter. So here we go.
You might need to focus on graduation, Chandra, but I'm not your committee chair.
But of
And-
course, Michael.
And I put Edie and John's email in the chat. I did clear it with them ahead of time, and they both said that they'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions you all might have there as well. Definitely find them both on Twitter. When I antagonize my students, I call it social media for good, and I encourage you to engage with people who share your passion. And I think Edie and John are a great place to start. What I really love, not just from a professional standpoint with the two of them, but also is how they bring their personal creative side into it. You might not know it, but Edie does amazing embroidery. And then I've seen her combine her embroidery and her mapping. And I've seen some absolutely beautiful work that she's done. And my wife is getting into embroidery, and we kind of emailed about this back and forth. And I always show my wife Edie's latest project. And it was actually an inspiration for a little birthday gift that my wife made me that was map related. And then with John, you always get to see what he's doing around his home, that he's bringing that creativity into his projects. And they're just great people to be engaged with online. So if you're looking for people to follow, social media for good, I definitely recommend both of them.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thanks everybody for your time
Thank you.
too. It was a lot of
Can
fun.
I ask a final unrelevant question?
Sure.
Yeah, I've always ESRI is a fantastic company. So I will always looking for where if we can invest in this company. Is ESRI ever considering going public?
Oh.
You might
I
have
don't-
answer to this, but I'm just really thank ESRI.
I don't think so, but
for making all the efforts and basically improving the quality and life of all the human beings.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you for
Same
sharing
here,
all
I
your
second
insights.
that.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is all of these people that are oftentimes find themselves either willingly or unwillingly as the sort of the public faces of companies. We've got Edie and John, Ken Field is another one. I think a lot about Dawn Wright and the work that she does promoting the environmental sciences, oceanography, climate change, but kind of on behalf of ESRI as their chief data scientist. There's just so many great people that are engaged with this company that I think this is wonderful. I would love to have like 6 more of these to follow up with you all, but thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. And I know we didn't get to talk about half the things we had originally set out to, but I think it was a really great conversation regardless.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
very
again.
much.
Thanks. It was fun.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Michael.
Sure thing.
Michael. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.